Hey everyone, today we're continuing on in our angle relationships unit, and today we're just going to do more practice applying what we know about specific angle relationships to solve for the measures of missing angles. Today though, the pictures of the parallel lines cut by a transversal are just going to be positioned a little bit different than what we're used to seeing. For example, in question 1, over to the right we have two parallel lines. The parallel lines are line M and line N, and they're cut by the transversal R. So again, this just looks a little bit different than what we're used to seeing, but as long as we know that M and N are the parallel lines and R is a transversal, all of our angle relationships will still come into play. Now I wrote that the measure of angle 2 is 40 degrees. It's important to point out that the numbers that are in this diagram are not the degree measures, but just the name of the angle. So angle 2 equals 40 degrees. So I know this angle equals 40 degrees. I'm going to use that measure to determine now the measure of all the missing angles. I like to start with the easiest one. I know angle 2 and angle 3 are vertical angles, which means they have to be equal to each other. So that means that angle 3 is also going to be equal to 40 degrees. Okay, I can now use the supplementary angle relationship. I can use alternate interiors. I can use corresponding angles. It does not matter which angle relationship I use, but I'm going to stick with the 40-degree angle, and I'm going to use the angle relationship of alternate interiors. I know angle 2 and angle 7 are alternate interior angles, which means they're equal to each other. So I know angle 7 also has to equal 40 degrees. Angle 6 is the vertical angle to angle 7, which means angle 6 has to be equal to angle 7, so angle 6 also equals 40 degrees. Okay, now that's all the angle measures that are going to equal 40 degrees. So now I'm actually going to have to do some math. I'm not going to look at angle 1. I know that angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary angles, which means together they have to add up to be 180 degrees. So I can find the measure of angle 1 by simply subtracting 180 minus 40. And when I do that, I get 140. So I know that angle 1 has to be equal to 140 degrees. Okay, by using the fact about supplementary angles. I know angle 4 is vertical to angle 1, which means they're equal to each other. So I know angle 4 also has to be equal to 140 degrees. Okay, and then I know that angle 4 and angle 5 are alternate interior angles, which means they are equal. So angle 5 also has to be equal to 140 degrees. And last but not least, angle 5 and angle 8 are vertical angles, which means they're equal to each other. So angle 8 also has to be equal to 140 degrees. All right, guys, you might have used different angle relationships to help you answer these, or to find these angle measures, and that is totally fine. Okay, we'll look at number 2. Number 2, again, just the picture looks a little bit different, but line D and line E are your parallel lines, and line A is your transversal. So I said if the measure of angle 5 is 141 degrees, then find the following angles. Okay, so angle 5 is 141 degrees. I now know that angle 7 is also going to be equal to 141 degrees because they are vertical angles. So I'm going to fill that in. I also know angle 7 and angle 6 are alternate interiors, which means they must be equal. So angle 6 is also going to equal 141 degrees. Angle 6 and angle 8 are vertical angles, which means angle 8 also has to be equal to 141 degrees because vertical angles are equal to each other. Okay, now I'm going to look at other angles. So I also know that angle 5 and angle 3 are supplementary angles. They're right next to each other and they're on a straight line. So together they have to equal 180 degrees. Well, I know angle 5 is already equal to 141, so I can simply subtract 180 minus 141 to find the measure of that angle, which is going to give me 39 degrees. So I know angle 3 is equal to 39 degrees. Angle 3 and angle 1 are vertical, which means angle 1 also has to equal 39 degrees. Angle 1 and angle 4 are alternate interior angles, which means they're equal. So angle 4 also has to equal 39 degrees. And last but not least, angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical, which means that they are equal. So angle 2 also has to equal 39 degrees. Okay. Moving right along, I'm going to skip 3. We'll do number 4 together. Again, this looks different, but we'll call this line A and line B, which are your parallel lines, and line C is your transversal. Okay, so again, the 14, 15, and 16 that you see, guys, are your angle names. They are not the measure in degrees. So I told you that this angle right here is equal to 136 degrees. So I only have to find 3 missing angles here, angle 14, 15, and 16. Well, I know angle 14 is the vertical angle to the angle that I gave you. So that means angle 14 also has to equal 136 degrees. Okay. I also know that these 2 angles are going to be supplementary, but that's not going to help me yet. But if I look at this 14 and this angle right here, those are your alternate interior angles, which means they're equal to each other, even though I don't have an angle lit name there. But I do know that this angle is also going to be equal to 136 degrees. Well, since this is equal to 130 degrees, this angle 16 and that angle are vertical angles, so they're equal to each other. So I know angle 16 also has to be equal to 136 degrees. Okay, I also know, I should say, that angle 15 and 16 are supplementary angles because they're right next to each other on a straight line. So I can find the measure of angle 15 by simply subtracting 180 minus 136. And 180 minus 136 is 44. So I know angle 15 has to be equal to 44 degrees. Okay. Number 5, I only gave you 3 angles, angle 17, 18, and 19. If you're looking at this problem, you might think, well, I can't answer it because I didn't give you the measure of any angles. But I did. This little box here tells us the measure of that angle. That little box tells me that it is a right angle, and all right angles are equal to 90 degrees. So that means that this angle right here is equal to 90 degrees. Well, these 2 angles together are supplementary. They're right next to each other and they're on this straight line, which is our transversal. So together they have to equal 180 degrees. So 180 minus 90 is simply 90 degrees. So I know angle 17 has to be equal to 90 degrees. Okay, so I now know this is going to be equal to 90. Since angle 17 is equal to 90, this is also going to be equal to 90, and this is going to be equal to 90 because they're all supplementary angles. Now, if you notice, this angle 17 and this angle 19 are corresponding angles. They're both in the same position, just on different lines. They're both on the bottom right. Since they're corresponding angles, they are equal to each other. So angle 19 is also going to be equal to 90 degrees. And angle 18 and 19 are supplementary, which means they have to add up to be 180. If angle 19 equals 90 degrees, I simply subtract 180 minus 90 to again get 90 degrees. So angle 18 is also equal to 90 degrees. Okay, we'll do number 7 together. Okay, number 7. Again, we only have to find the measure of 3 different angles. Okay, since I gave you this box here, this tells me that this angle is equal to 90 degrees. Okay, now this angle together also has to be equal to 90 degrees. But that angle is made up of 2 angles, angle 24 and the one that equals 96 degrees. If I know both of these have to add up to be 90 degrees, I can find out the measure of angle 24 by simply subtracting 90 minus 46 to find that missing angle. And we get 44. So I know angle 24 has to equal 44 degrees. Okay. Angle 25 also has to be a 90-degree angle. So that is going to be 90 degrees. And now angle 24 and 26 are alternate interior angles. They're on opposite sides of the transversal here, which means they have to be equal to each other. So angle 26 is also going to be equal to 44 degrees. Okay, sometimes we're just going to look at these diagrams just a little bit differently than what we're used to. It helps like turning your screen a little bit so that you can see what your alternate interiors, what your correspondings, and so on and so forth. All right, we're going to do one more together. In question 8 here, we have parallel lines still. We have, we'll call this line M and line N. But in this case, we have two transversals. I'll call this one A and I'll call this one B. Okay, but all of our angle relationships are still going to come into play. So I have to find the measure of angle 27, 28, 29, and 30. Okay, I'm going to start with angle 27, and here's why. This line, M, is our parallel line. These three angles are together. Together, those three angles have to add up to be 180 degrees because they are supplementary. They are supplementary because they're right next to each other and they're on a straight line. So together they have to equal 180 degrees. I know that these two angles, one equals 60 and one equals 50. So I have to figure out the measure of that missing angle. So I simply have to subtract 180 minus 60 and minus 50 in order to figure out that missing piece. And when I do that, I get 70 degrees. So that tells me that angle 27 is equal to 70 degrees. Okay, so I found out the one. Now, if we look, this angle, the one that says 50, and angle 29 are alternate interior angles. They are on opposite sides of that transversal. And they're inside those two parallel lines, making them equal to each other. So that tells me angle 29 is going to be equal to 50 degrees. Okay, now angle 29 and 30 are supplementary because they're right next to each other and they're on a straight line. So together they have to equal 180 degrees. So I know that angle 29 is equal to 50 degrees, so I can find out the measure of angle 30 by simply subtracting 180 minus 50, and we get 130 degrees, which tells me angle 30 is equal to 130 degrees. Now I have to figure out angle 28. Well, angle 28 and angle 60 are alternate interiors. They are on opposite sides of this transversal, and they're inside the two parallel lines, making them alternate interior, which also makes them equal to each other. So I know angle 28 has to be equal to 60 degrees. Okay? All right, guys, you are now going to do the assignment for today. You are going to need to know all of those different types of angle relationships in order to do this successfully. You need to know the definitions of them and if they're congruent, if they add up to be 180, whatever the case may be. Okay, so take your time with this. And please, if you have any questions, please reach out to me.